Hi, welcome to AI and Intel Knowledge Work, our 2023 review and 2024 look ahead. And I'm really excited to talk about this, not just because it's the new year, but because a lot has happened, as all of you know, which is why we're here. We want to get caught up. We want to start discussing what we're seeing and what it means to each of us. And I'm Cynthia Chang Correa. If this is your first time with us here, and we're not going to go through all my, you can certainly pause it and um, and, uh, and just review this as you wish. My background is in competitive intelligence at the of technology, and in particular here we're talking about artificial intelligence, but as well as other aspects that I think are very important here too, which is knowledge management, and looking at warning systems and foresight and so forth. So I'm going to bring that all together to discuss the topic at hand. And so with this, for our agenda for today, I would like to talk about where we've been, so that we can all get caught up on this, and just highlights, because a lot has happened and we're not going to have time to do a deep dive. We did do a session back, I believe it was in September, where we did a review of the past 6 months. So if you want to see that, well, I believe I posted that on YouTube, so you can check that out in our channel, and there'll be details on that later. And we also will be talking about 2024, which is really, I think, what matters here, so we can prepare at this point for what's to come, for the year and beyond. And we won't have time to get into all the details and tips on preparations. And so, as you'll see later on, we have that queued up for follow-up discussions as well, because this is multifaceted, as many aspects of this are, and insights, intel, knowledge work is so vast. So there's really a lot to it, and we want to give it its due. So we'll talk more about those, but we can certainly get that discussion started today. And then the focus here really is where AI, in particular generative AI, is shaping, impacting research, analysis, intel, insights, knowledge work, not other aspects, not sort of cool aspects. So I do want to stay focused on that for today, and I do hope too that in our discussions too, if there's anything that you'd like to use, to please provide proper attributions and citations, not only to what I'm saying, but perhaps others who are to this as well. So with that, just dive right into it. And so where we've been, so here with generative AI models, we have had this explosion, and I'm not saying anything that is new or earth-shattering. This is just a review here. But what we saw at the beginning of last year, and technically towards the end of 2022, we're, OpenAI coming on board with GPT-3 and 3.5, and subsequently that launched this arms race, if you will, of large language models. But what we ended the year not with simply large language models, because this arms race really brought about large multimodal models, which is the LMMs that you see on the screen there. And the LMMs, you would start to move into large language models having capabilities of text to video, text to audio, and to photos, and so on and so forth. And so we're starting to see that these models are not simply limited to text generation. Now, with large language models, though, we're still pretty much squarely in this. We're just entering into the LLM land with the advent of Google Gemini, having been announced, just a couple of weeks ago or so, and then Chat GPT or OpenAI announcing that their GPT is now also multimodal, because now it's integrated with DALL-E API and so forth. And we also see that NVIDIA, we don't talk enough about NVIDIA as far as I'm concerned. People focus so much on OpenAI, and now Google, Microsoft for sure, but But NVIDIA is one of the most innovative companies, and they're really doing some very cutting edge applications for the commercial sector. And we tend to think of them as a chips company, and they certainly are, because in the AI stack, they're really at the very foundational aspect of providing the literal hardware for this, and they are also shaping other aspects too, we'll talk about later, but they are doing some very interesting things, certainly on the model side as well. So you've got the commercial side, in ChatGPT, as you see, largely still large language models. Claude and Cohere and others certainly are in the mix as well. Then we also have on the sort of other track of large language models, open source. And this is where we have a lot of exciting new developments happening here, because open source is providing a lot of new functionalities, solving some problems, like trying to address hallucinations or scale, trying to enable models to be able to do a lot more with less data. And so we see that with Stanford Alpaca is among the very first to do that. You've got others that are coming up. Orca, Microsoft's Orca also, had addressed, has addressed some issues as well. And now we're even in Orca 2. We've got, but the point here is that we've got, in addition to the commercial ones that we hear a lot about, we've got open source happening on a larger scale, smaller scale. And that's going to be a trend, for us to pay attention to. But that started certainly and exploded in 2023, like everything else. And then we've also have all media generators too, and like the really interesting ones that people tend to play with, the visual, video, and so forth. And I won't get into all of these, but this is just to provide an overview of where we've been. But one thing too, we also want to pay attention to, in addition to the evolution from large language models to large multimodal models, is now branching off into more small language models, because of projects like Stanford's Alpaca, which, by the way, is not, they had actually pulled that because of some safety concerns, because of the way people might use that, because it became a rather powerful little tool. But when you have developers, now really a couple of million developers in open AI land alone, working on helping to enhance these tools, and then you've got developers working on enhancing models and even developing small language models. The idea here is to subspecialize. The idea is to also enable us to do more with less data, so that we have to invest as much on the data side, which is really cost prohibitive for companies of all sizes, for teams of all sizes, and it can also be overkill. So that's something that we had seen happening in 2003, not just the launch of these things. And just to illustrate this point too about explosion and growth. So back in September, when we did our recap, I had a screenshot of this, of Hugging Face, which is a site that collects a number of different libraries in addition to various other tools. But they have models here of open source tools that you can, the developers post here and that folks can use. So when I talk about some of the open source models in the previous slide, you can literally download them here. So here with these models, you can see that in September, we were really clocking in at about 322,000, almost 323. Fast forward to today, or technically yesterday, we have 456,000 ish, and most of these were added in 2023. So that's mind-boggling. You also have an explosion too of various publications in archive alone, where a lot of AI research is published, at least, or pre-published. You will see hundreds being published sometimes in a week, which is a lot to wade through. Some of these are more important than others, but these are all signs that we see of tremendous growth that's happening, and that doesn't look like it's letting up. We also see here in Hugging Face now, data sets alone are almost at 100,000. and certainly we'll reach that this year. So open source data sets that people can use for training their models. And so you see tremendous growth, and then even in AI video development. And so this is just 2023 alone, where you see in Q1, a lot of the innovations, and these are papers and models are being released and so forth. So you see Q1, Q2, still holding pretty steady. Q3 starts to expand, and Q4 exploded. And this is really what's happening today. And so video technologies, are improving, enhancing tremendously, and we're going to see that really happening in 2024 in a grander scale than what we've even seen in 2023. And there are implications to what we do, even though we don't typically think of ourselves, as folks who produce videos. And so all of these developments are beyond foundation models, however, because we've also got chatbots, that have exploded. I'm not going to focus on those because, quite frankly, everybody's doing chatbots, right? So I don't think that a lot needs to be said about that. I think what's interesting is where chatbots are going to go, and we'll talk about that in 2024. And so here, it's important for us to remember that it's not just about the foundation models, but we have specialized third-party AI tools, but some of them are APIs that are sitting on top of these foundation models. And so the foundation models are serving as a platform for other functions. But you also have standalone third-party tools that are coming in. And so they vary from task level tools that, summarizers, translators, the early types of tools that we saw that kind of dazzled us at the beginning of the year. Hey, look, I can design my own logo, with this generator. I have these templates. I can also, translate and so forth. So, or transcribe videos automatically. Certainly magical from where we were, but it's really nothing from where we're headed, because now we're moving towards application level. And so this is where we're not using tools that are sort of thin tools that are sitting on top of necessarily some of the large language models, or that are sort of standalone, very simple tools, but tools that are really moving more towards end-to-end, supporting workflows. So that's producing videos and reports, enabling discovery. And even OpenAI, in October at their dev day, announced that they were allowing people to create their own GPTs, to subspecialize. And so they're capitalizing on that. So specialization is something that started last year. It's really going to ramp up this coming year. And it's not so incidentally, OpenAI right now, and towards the end of 2023, they were also using specialists, recruiting specialists, to serve, as Red Hat teams, to be able to help tune their models. And so even the foundational models, as much as they're very broad-based, they're starting to specialize as well on top of that. And then we saw the rise of the assistants, starting really with Google Copilot, and they launched first in GitHub to help the coders, with coding, and then expanded from there. And so by the end of 2023, we saw that either there's pilots or full-on launches, with not just with GitHub Copilot, which is owned by Microsoft, but certainly with Microsoft 365, as well as Copilot for excuse me, for their engine Bing and so on. And so there will be co-pilots for various facets. And you see Google getting into it too in their workspace with Duet, supporting, that's their version of the assistants. And then others that are more independent, and that can also be plugins like Echo Base, as well as Autopilot that can integrate, say, with Zoom, for example. So we're starting to see that, and there'll be an explosion in that space as well. And then the various types of platforms and aggregators that allow people, especially developers, to create, various types of model gardens, where they can access various types of models and be able to create, new types of products, from there, using the workbenches and the various types of tools. And so Google Vertex AI is a good example of that. NVIDIA also has their own, and others. So these are the spaces that we want to be paying attention to going forward. And we also been paying attention to, in 2023, the barriers. Now, the barriers came up very soon, very quickly. We all understood that hallucinations, right, were the thing, and as well as costs. The costs of training, for fine tuning, maintaining these types, and then we always forget maintenance, but actually maintaining these tools, because you do need to retrain them periodically, is tremendous, especially for large language models. And we're starting to see costs coming down because we have announcements, that NVIDIA, for example, have their H100 and soon the H200 chips, that are going to bring down the costs for a lot of, the large language model producers, if you can get the chips. But you also have other chip makers coming in, not so much with robust, chips, but chips, that will also, be reasonable substitutes with, very more competitive ROI, bringing down the cost of actually bringing online these types of tools. And that's only going to go down, right? We also see things like the context windows. And by the way, these green arrows that you see, green means good, and red means is not so good, it's not positive. And so whether or not it's coming down or whether or not these things are going up, the green indicates, we're moving in a positive direction. In context windows, so these windows in which you can input your request, and then you also get the output. Initially, if you remember back in the early days, you could input, and the output wasn't very robust. It was more modest with GPT-3 to 3.5, and so we went from context windows that can support say 3,000 words to now with OpenAI's recent GPT-4 4.5 Turbo supporting over 100,000. So that is also very positive, allowing for more robust searches. Data quality is also shifted too in 2023, where we're seeing that quality is improving. A lot of folks are enhancing quality for their proprietary data, and we're also now collecting them, so that we're collecting them in ways that enable us to use it more productively. But whether or not it's unstructured or structured, AI is certainly helping with that as well. And AI is also helping to structure unstructured data. So that's also helping things along and improving the scale and scope. And so we also see that synthetic data, was starting to be used in a more robust fashion in 2023, where you don't necessarily have to have, your own, hard data that you've collected, but you can use synthetic data as reasonable substitutes to train your AI models. And we also saw the slight improvement of user interface, user experience within these models that has been a key barrier. Let's face it, these tools are hard to use. And so a lot of folks, haven't exactly jumped on board. We're seeing also that we're trying to address biases, privacy concerns, and as well as various things as transparency and explainability. So we have barriers that still exist. Many of these key ones are certainly improving. But there's also barriers that reside in environments, organizations, and people. And the landscape, that shifting landscape under us is really hard to keep track of. And I can't tell you how many very late nights I've had, as well as other trainers and experts who are monitoring this. And I don't think many of us got much sleep over 2023. And there was pretty much an important announcement, every week, every other week. And we're also helping our clients put together roadmaps. And we're seeing that, and people are struggling with those as well to understand, well, where do I go? Because we don't know what's next. And then use cases are also going up, but we're still trying to understand what are the most innovative ones, because, that's, really where, where a lot of the leaps that we'll be able to make are, but we're also, focusing on use cases that are more efficient, that are more focused on efficiencies and productivities, and that's where we're at. Ethics and law are also, some barriers for a lot of folks. Corporations have certain policies, people are being rightly cautious. And so that still exists. We really haven't had any major breakthroughs other than corporations, have established some policies that can help their employees understand where the guardrails are. Workflows, practices, and policies, certainly, are beginning to evolve, and we'll talk more about that as well. And then we're beginning to think more about AI literacy and competencies, but very much barriers, because organizations are having a hard time finding experts in generative AI or in AI in general to be able to help them make those leaps. It's very competitive out there for people who have those skills, and people are trying to ramp up. And then the cross skilling as well, that's necessary. And we started to I think wake up to the need for that. And now beyond foundation models, we're also seeing in 2023, it brought us wearables. So we saw that human.ai, created, many of you saw the brooch, that will project, the AI outputs, particularly right now from OpenAI, which they partnered with, and but we're also seeing wearables in some of the traditional areas as well. We've had already, AI, AR, VR, XR goggles for some time, and we saw with the advent of Google's Gemini Nano version, because Gemini has multiple versions, but the Nano is really geared for the mobile market, and that was announced, although we didn't see it realized in 2023, so that's to come. And then there's AI plus, then that means it's AI, plus robotics and computer vision. A lot of work is being done on the innovative side. We haven't really seen a lot happening just yet, on a wider scale. But that also really started, very much in 2023. And then advancing model architectures and integrations. Well, what does that mean? Well, rather than our one-to-one, hey, I'm just working with, OpenAI's various tools or Google Gemini, and so on, you can actually stitch together various types of AI tools, into integrations using existing products like Zapier, and also using chaining. LangChain has also been in existence, where it allows organizations to be able to chain various, otherwise standalone AI tools, to be able to create and support workflows. So we started to see more advancements in that area as well. And then another area in which we're starting to get beyond just the one-to-one, hey, one person or team using a particular AI model for a specific task, is the expansion of mixture of experts. And this is a particular technique that was initially introduced in, I believe, around 2012. And the mixture of experts is basically where you have, and you'll see in this model, it is particularly important that you have an individual inputting into the AI system, but the AI system isn't just one model. It's actually multiple models that are basically doing that are expert in various areas. And you have a gating model that basically governs. You have a model that governs between each of these that help you interpret that input and then distribute that to where it should go within this mixture of experts towards the output that you see. So it's not just a person, one individual or team interacting with one particular model and getting an output, which is how most of us interact with it, but basically you have an AI model that is helping other submodels generate better outputs through specialization. And so Mixtral announced that at the end of 2023, with their 8x7b, that they are really getting into this, and Mixtral is open source. Now, of course, most of us don't have the experience or access to this, but we're going to see more organizations commercializing this aspect as well. So in 2023, I also put out some predictions, and so this is just trying to keep myself honest here. So I summarized the key ones here, and so we did see that expansion of solutions from AI developers we just talked about, and we did say that it was going to be of varying quality, and certainly that came about. Wave of existing products that will expand through generative AI, and much hype along with that, and it's interesting because I in working with companies, some folks within my client environments dismiss generative AI altogether, right? Because they look at the Gartner hype cycle, they say, oh, Gartner says that generative AI is kind of almost at the crest, and so they're kind of almost waving it off. And we'll talk more about that, because I'll have a session on just how to interpret AI hype, and we don't want to be too dismissive of that, because that that's a simplistic way of looking at AI, is to distill it into just generative AI and AI equals hype in requesting. We want to actually break it down into facets and components. And so, so it's really important that we look at this, from that perspective. And so that's just a bit of a teaser for what we'll discuss later on. In another session, but generative AI barriers will continue, will rapidly lower, and that did in fact happen. The hallucinations and so forth, cost, they still are issues, but compared to where we started, there have been significant changes that enable us to begin to expand our adoption. And we also have the system level productivity solutions, as I mentioned, and then just the start of rapid and exponential shifts, right? The fact that we're really on the cusp of seeing .com level changes. Now, where I didn't quite get it right was that I did see the diminishment of research analysis and knowledge work over time. And that takes some time to see and to reveal itself. So that part, I think we're still seeing emerging. And but I also did think that there are going to be knowledge related layoffs starting in this year, in 2024, and I was wrong on that. It actually accelerated. We started to see some of these layoffs occurring in 2023, probably around mid-year, and I didn't expect that. I thought we would have more runway. And it's not to say that it's wide scale, but I really thought that it was going to take a bit more time before we start to see that sort of thing. What I missed, the pace of AI innovations. While we're not feeling the full impact, it's happening much more rapidly than many of us had anticipated, including people who are thought leaders in AI proper. And so, so that's something to keep in mind as we look forward to 2024. And so as we dive into this, in 2024, this is just everything we've discussed, that are trending is just really going to magnify. And that's something to keep in mind. And I know a lot of people feel like this is part of the hype, cycle, but I think in some regards, it's not going to be, especially for folks who are adopting AI, for innovation, as a competitive asset. And so we're going to really see that AI is going to touch nearly all domains for sure, whether or not we realize it. But the first mover advantage is still going to be very much a reality. We know that traditionally, when we're looking at various other innovations, there isn't necessarily a first mover advantage because they make mistakes, and then you have the second, third movers that are taking advantage of those lessons. But what's different in AI is that AI relies on data. And the more time you have, the earlier you can start to gather and leverage data, the deeper the insights you get, and also the more you can leverage AI. AI will start to enable more advanced AI. So with more experience, with earlier experience, you're giving yourself that much room and space to work with. And so as we do that, we're also seeing that there are new multimodal models coming online with, Gemini was announced, but Gemini Nano and Pro levels were released at the end of last year, but Ultra will be released at the beginning of this year with their 1.0. It's going to be more or less at the LLM level, but it is designed to be a multimodal model, and with aspects of, if you're familiar with DeepMind, Google DeepMind's AlphaGo, where it can basically kind of train itself, and that's also going to be a game changer too. Apple's coming out with their Ferret model. Mistral is going to come out with a GPT rival, and that's open source. OpenAI is working on GPT-5, and we'll probably see something in that regard later this year. So we can expect that even in the foundational the large model fit space, it's going to continue to explode. But we're going to especially see specialized solutions that are more robust. We're going to get away from the thin wrapper solutions like, hey, here's a PDF summary, here's a translation tool. It's really going to be more integrated. And many of these will be commercial, third party, but they are also going to be incorporated into these various foundation models. And so keep an eye out for that, because that really will help with adoption and expansion, especially for insight and knowledge work, because we've been kind of waiting for these tools to be easier to use. We've seen early adopters use some of these tools, to varying, success. But we're also going to see, the AI plus that I mentioned, it move exponentially, because that AI stack, is really going to get much more expanded and robust along the lines of the specialized models and specialized components that we've talked about. And so we can see areas in which, safety and security, agriculture, quality assurance, those are areas that are really going to, expand on that as well. And we're going to see AI married with low code and no code. And we can already see that generative AI can produce code, with certainly through the co-pilots and also OpenAI, and other large language models can do that now. But various other low code, no code tool providers, it'll become a lot easier for folks, to be able to generate these types of tools, almost in a WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get level, without having to even understand how to input, to prompt, which has been a barrier for a lot of folks. And just as you learn, how to prompt, well, they changed the foundation models a little bit, so your old prompt, technique didn't quite work. And so there have been a lot of clunkiness over 2023, and that's really going to be the barriers to that is going to be minimized as well, so that this enables us to be able to solve more complex problems and to be able to do so much more readily. There'll be more at our fingertips, as opposed to requiring various specialists, especially specialist coders. And low code plus the small data is also going to move us towards narrow purpose-built specialized tools. So again, it's less about some of the large language and multimodal models to get things done, but for us, knowledge work, we're going to be able to start tackling, specific, types of tasks and workflows that we haven't had access to. So, so a lot of this is it's just going to be heated, and there's going to be a lot of competition, right? Sort of the last one in is a rotten egg, as we say, as American children say. And so the heated competition is really going to be in all layers of the AI stack. The large language models, large multi-model models are going to be augmented, and I've already mentioned that too. But key too is we're going to be looking at one platform providing multiple functions. And there will be an expansion in that. In fact, OpenAI last year, and then their development day, they announced that very thing, and in fact, even decimated, entire categories of, their developers' tools. And so developers learned that bitter lesson. They're not going to create, some very thin tools. It's going to be much more robust. Even as the large language models begin to provide multiple functions, they're going to try to get ahead of that. So the third-party developers are going to try to get ahead of that, so that the large language models, large modal models will not render them obsolete through their own tools. And then we'll also see more specializations with different types of subroutines and specialized models that will come online, that will be stitched together and or just within a particular domain. And we're going to see more model aggregation. Right now we have Poe, which is a site that allows you to use multiple large language models in addition to other tools. So very much like the model gardens that I mentioned, that that tend to be more available to large commercial enterprises. But we're going to see more of that for smaller teams as well, so it'll be much more cost effective. And so you can start to experiment. And we're going to see too that various early tools that we adopted are going to be expanded. So for example, everybody was talking about chatbots. Well, chatbots are going to start, we're going to start to see the first visual agents. So it's not just going to be text-based chatbots built off of an LLM. It's going to be multimodal. So you could be chatting with an avatar. You could be chatting with ultimately a figure that looks almost realistic initially, and then ultimately realistic after 2024, 2025. But remember when I mentioned that the visual side is moving exponentially. So when costs, barrier come down, we're going to see a lot more of this. But this is going to be a competitive factor for a lot of folks, because typing in chat isn't very intuitive. But if you can talk with a chat agent, through some of the visual and audio innovations that are happening. That's really what we're moving towards. And then we're also, as I mentioned, various types of combined AI models. Large language models are still going to be moving into the multimodals plus the small language models and the mixture of experts, or the MOEs that you see here. But you see that in this line, I have a question mark, because we have to maintain flexibility for new innovations, because everything I've mentioned thus far were innovated within the span of about 15 months last year and in late 2022. So, and it's just going to be more AI enabled, right? Open source models are going to be approaching the performance of closed source models. So that's going to open up a lot of opportunities for folks too, because it's going to make things more accessible. So the real barriers are going to be the costs of running it and finding expertise to really be able to work it. And then we're going to see that a lot of these cost savings too will translate into lower subscription or transactional model costs too, and that's already started to happen. Assistants and co-pilots is another category for this year that we're going to see, launching many, it's going to become routine for folks in 2025, where you're going to have these tools that, as with Microsoft Copilot, you will be able to have your meetings summarized, and it will basically generate reports, combining your meeting notes with other meeting notes over time, maybe say on a quarterly basis, with other content within your own organization around a specific topic, perhaps, so that you can generate a report, and you can do this in an automated fashion, right? So it's not just about scheduling and calendar items and reading emails. This is really going to be about productivity, and so this will become routinized. We're going to see expanded research and analysis capabilities to in production capabilities, that like I said, various sort of routinely automated reports that will be happening, but also just monitoring various types of activities, right, which is right up our insights and knowledge alley. And we're going to see too that a lot of these tools, because of copilots, they're going to be able to not just to search on your own specific content, but also content throughout the organization or throughout your team as permissions allow, but also third-party tools. So if you have, LexisNexis, Factiva, and various, other types of tools, and you can see that all of this will start to become integrated. It already does exist as it is now. Some companies just do this, in a bespoke fashion, but copilots, assistants and copilots are going to make it available to the rest of us. And Microsoft Copilot, the enterprise product, they're thinking that it's probably going to clock in about $30 a seat. Well, thinking about the time savings, that really isn't a whole lot, right, for the return you're going to get. So, so adoption, while it is pretty expensive now, as I mentioned in the previous slide, costs are coming down. We're also, seeing that these co-pilots are integrating actual analytical models. So with 365 Copilot, you can see that SWOT SWOT is available, so you can actually just ask it to to run a SWOT model based on the content that you're pointing it towards. Industry analysis, market analyses, product analyses, financial, et cetera. Many of these are going to be integrated. We're not going to necessarily need a human to produce the first pass, right? That first draft of it. And that's going to be available to end users as well, along with reporting and presentation templates. So a lot of this is really moving towards, again, end-to-end workflow support. Precision and quality are going to vary. We're going to have to babysit these tools, right? But the trick is how. Many of us haven't figured that out yet, right? Because we haven't started to use these tools, and then even for folks who have started to use these tools, process expertise is another level, right? To be able to not just look at the task level, but be able to look at the parts to the whole. And so those are new skills that we're going to have as well. And so those who with longstanding Intel experience, terrific. You can start to bring that in. But the processes that we have been using and that we understand are also going to change. So that's something also to keep in mind. But as we're using these co-pilots, efficiency, productivity, that's going to be incentive for folks, but also network effect when others are using it. and you want assistants to talk to other assistants, we're going to start to see that network effect is going to spur adoption, right? As we saw with cell phones, as we saw with social media adoption as well. So in 2024, start using the co-pilots. Many of these are free. And so start experimenting with them and getting familiar with them. It doesn't mean that you rely on them yet, but we need to start doing that, because if we don't, we're going to slip behind. Companies and organizations this year, they're going to continue to seek efficiencies, productivity, and exponential growth, right? Not all companies are going to be looking at all three. I've got some clients that are just looking at efficiencies and productivity at this point. They're not worried about exponential growth because they're just in learning mode. Others are just, hey, we're there. We want all of it, and they're investing in that. We're also seeing more standardized AI governance, and there will be a lot more of that, because we're moving towards, learning best practices and iterating on that. So that's going to bring more certainty and less risk to folks using it. And so we'll feel like, we have more of a comfort zone within this. And this governance isn't just within companies and organizations, but also, obviously, more broadly as government starts to get involved too, and professional associations and so on. And then there will be, not just established use cases like chatbots enabling and various other things, but the number of novel ones, that we'll see. And I'll talk more about those in a bit, but that's just something to think about, for companies and organizations. But we're going to see not just broader solutions and large platforms, but micro solutions. So specific teams will have specific types of tools or suites of tools. So that's something for us to prepare for, not just as users, but as developers and builders. We will sponsor these, and for those of us who have low code, no code experience, and no code, by definition requires, little to no experience, we can start to develop these as well, and they'll become easier to use. The AI landscape, still rapidly changing and probably getting a lot messier. The lack of skill set still, because we're not quite caught up, and the tendency for the users to satisfy, to just basically say, hey, we're at the good enough level, means that we're really at the risk of, patchwork types of solutions. And we're going to see failed solutions, because there will be gaps, there will be missteps, because a lot of folks are jumping into AI without having foundational understanding of how to manage AI, which is a skill set unto itself. And so that's one of the things that I'm seeing, that a lot of people are just diving right in, but not really thinking about, well, how do we stitch all this together to create something that is more unified, that we can manage, workflows, processes, systems. And then personalization, various types of on-the-fly creations. We're going to see, even more transformation in, ads and marketing, and that's going to also spur some transformations in how we research and the insights that we can gather. But that raises a lot of questions. What does all this mean in terms of our Intel process as it exists? Because some of this is going to be circumvented. You'll have tools that will be able to carry out the entire workflow, right? At least in a rudimentary fashion. And so that opens up a can of worms, because satisficing on top of that, means that people are going to miss those. If you're developing key intelligence topics and questions, if end users can just jump right in, that could get very messy as well. And then we also have, not just the quality assurance issues, but how do we bring humans into that loop? People are going to want to, as we saw with the .com boom, dive right in and start using the search engines and feeling, enabled and empowered. And we're seeing that with AI. We're going to see that more so with AI, but the stakes are high and the gaps can be much bigger. So problems, that we're going to be grappling with. And then we have changing insights and knowledge practices. In this section here now, we're talking about, what all this means that we just discussed, to our own insights and knowledge practices. So the increased reliability means that there's going to be a lot more AI first drafts. People are just going to create first drafts for efficiency's sake. And that's just going to be routine practice. The problem with that is not the efficiency part, but that it may anchor people into that first draft. So if there are gaps in that first draft and you don't have somebody seasoned looking at this and saying, this tool is missing these components, let me iterate, and now I'm going to enhance in the subsequent drafts, they're going to go with it. Maybe they'll just do some light editing of a report, for example. So these are the types of things that I'm already starting to see. I have seen some presentations, for example, on AI for CI, in which the CI practitioner, talks about how, they're just implementing, some of these tools with no discussion about the intelligence processor cycle, and ensuring that there's quality assurance along each of these components as a backup in this transition period. There's no discussion about any gaps that may be there. They're just saying, hey, yeah, we've just designed this collection tool. It's awesome. Check it out. And this is what we got out of it. And it's very tempting to just run with those tools without realizing that there is an entire body of knowledge that these tools don't support. And so I have begun to see that, and I find that actually very alarming. And so there's also number two, greater access to on-demand products. And so enhancements in AI capabilities and in the user interface is just going to make it easier to use. So so as I mentioned, folks are jumping right in, right? These tools are allowing us to synthesize, summarize, reporting, on their competitor market and macro environmental content, and automating that, right? And so again, when we're relying on the automation and over relying on it during this transition period, gaps will happen. And so what are we missing? And we're not thinking enough about that, right? Satisficing right now is really, I think, the default approach. And we're also going to be seeing too, in the second bullet under number two, automatic updates to key intelligence topics, because let's not forget the co-pilots and assistants, you can set up automatic, generation, of tools. So whatever analytical model that you've already started on, you can ask it to update your Porter's 5 forces model that you generated 6 months ago. And so on and so forth, right? And then generative AI video quality is going to improve. Well, why is that important to what we do, right? We're not video producers. Well, it's going to change how we present. It's because now what we're really talking about is when you've got now a video that is generated in seconds, it's generating only seconds of video. That's going to move on into producing video shorts and then longer form with a lot less quality loss. So that quality is going to be there. And many folks are going to start turning to that for narratives and storytelling of their analysis. It's going to be that much more compelling. And so we're going to start to see more movement towards that, I think, starting in 2024. And then we're going to see number 4, domain advancements transfers, right, to, to research and insights, in other areas. So say, for example, education is doing a lot more in their tutorials. And so, say, Khan Academy has, Conmigo, and they are, providing personalization tutorials and videos and so forth. Why is that important to what we do? Well, all of that is really transferable to how we can analyze and deliver our intel. And so what's happening in other domains in terms of personalization, localization, context, ease of use, and so forth, in the way that they manage content is going to be carrying over into what we do in knowledge, what insights work. Also, predictive analytics is another example, in various other domains that you see here, that is also going to be integrated as well. And so it's going to help us, with foresight aspects of AI. And then, as I mentioned already, and probably, kind of beating, that horse, multimodal products and solutions, will exist, but it's really just going to produce multi-media analysis and production. So it's not just going to be a report, because that's going to be generated by co-pilots, right? At least on the first draft. So that's going to be more commoditized. So how do we, as intel, insight, knowledge pros, be able to expand beyond that? So we're going to have to up our game, as it were, in leaning into multimedia analysis and production. And so a lot of this is really going to mean that we're going to have to produce more than what the end users can access, right? And that's number 6. And then computer vision is going to be much more important too, and mobile. And so we'll have devices, and as well as services, satellite services that will provide visual analysis. So for us to be able to calculate shadows of buildings, square footage and facilities and so forth. It's going to be a lot easier to do and maybe even automated within specific domains. Augmented reality, or AR, VR, XR, is going to expand analysis to 3D. So it's not just going to be X and Y axes, but Z axes that we're interacting through goggles, and that's already started, and it's going to start to build, to interesting effects, because it'll be much more compelling. And as we have meetings, that's going to also help spur adoption of the multiverse, as teams begin to, converge around this type of analysis. And again, it also becomes more compelling for teams and end users. And it's going to be much more challenging for us to redefine our processes and workflows, as I mentioned, not just in the Intel cycle, but in other cycles as well. And so we're going to see this, inherent, struggle, because we'll have folks with depth of experience, but less AI innovation or AI background, and vice versa. Then you have people without much experience but more technical background, and so during this interim period we have to bring that together, because what we're going to be experiencing are more gaps on either side of this, and we're going to see a lot more folks just not knowing their unknown unknowns, and just not realizing that there's more to it, because to what we're doing in terms of these specialized areas. Because just because you've got some tools that can help you do a little doesn't mean you can do a lot or everything, and that's going to be an interesting, I think, transition for many of us too. So I already mentioned satisficing, as sort of a trend in our approach, but sacrificing as well. I think that in some cases we're going to have to abandon certain types of practices, as just realistic trade-offs, because sort of that ship has sailed, and users just simply are not going to accept taking more time and necessarily applying more diligence to producing first pass or foundational analysis. And so how do we deal with that? How do we help manage that as managers? So I want to look at the scenarios going beyond 2022 as well. And so whoops, so here I just want you to just indulge me in this scenario, where we have organizational managers beyond 2024, will have AI assistants automatically deliver personalized updates to their specific kits, competitor analysis, specific analytical frameworks in any format: report, presentation, video, with links to additional multimedia details or citations, right? So all of that is there. The follow-up for open source intelligence research and analysis is also going to be available on demand, even in real time, right? So you get that initial report, hey, give me a follow-up. Okay, done. Advanced requested human intelligence may be gathered via interviews, Delphi panels, automated surveys, or other methods. So humans are still involved in that. But the content itself, though, is automatically translated, transcribed, summarized, and synthesized via an AI agent, and then that agent will alert, various users, and you can also have that material available for retrieval and analysis that can be used, for automated generation or on-demand requests, as I just described in the earlier paragraph. And then the way we go about with new kits and requests is that we're going to be setting up via video or audio chatbot, guiding the end user through the process, because it's just going to be available, even if there is an AI manager, and because it's going to be Intel more available to most people. You don't necessarily have enough managers or enough, insights, Intel practitioners to be able to satisfy all of the management needs for Intel, right? So hey, video, audio, chatbots are going to be a good place. Some of these kits are automatically going to be recommended as well, because these systems are going to be smart enough to say, hey, did you think about this or that? And these kits will be automatically generated when events or conditions warrant. There could be some event that will trigger, and the system will know, hey, I need to just start to investigate this, create a kit, and start generating some research and analysis behind that. And the AI agent may also present potential decisions when events or conditions trigger a need, or if specific reports or updates, that are personalized, to include these recommendations, are also triggered. So a particular AI manager, I'm sorry, particular manager will be able to set up, a personalized AI agent, to monitor continually, and to be able to pick up on different types of signals, events, or triggers, and then just just start to kick in into the decision support process. Even as managers may separately request the agents to present and review scenarios on an ad hoc basis. Now, we're not there yet, but do you see that the components that I've been discussing in terms of where we were in 2023 and where we will be in 2024 are headed towards this in the beyond? And so the time for us as practitioners is here for us to think about what to do next, how we prepare for that, and how we ensure that there's levels of quality and maintaining human in the loop in various stages. So now at this point, I want to just focus on how we build on this for 2024 and where I'm going to be looking. And so for people who are seasoned CI or Intel collectors, these are not going to be exotic to you. This is probably what you're already doing for other domains as well. But I'll be looking at different conferences. So this month, the Consumer Electronics Conference is happening, as it does every year. And so I'm going to keep an eye on AI and robotics and a lot of automation. That's that's going to be huge there. Various types of AI conferences that happen. There's the World Conference, but there's also local conferences as well. Domain-specific conferences that are specific to industries. Industry conferences, they're all talking about AI as well, so we're paying attention to that. Announcements and dev days are really important to the work that I do. I have to pay attention to all the various announcements that occur. Not just on dev days themselves, but sometimes they're just only released, on YouTube channels or, or other venues, even press releases or blogs. OpenAI is notorious, for just posting, important things on their blogs. Paying attention to all of that, and seeing how, how all of this is stitching together. Research papers that are, published or pre-published, in particular, on archive. And IP filings as well. Looking at, so for example, I look at NVIDIA's patent filings. As I mentioned before, we don't pay enough attention to NVIDIA. We think they're a chips company. That's how we tend to talk about them. But they are one of the biggest innovators in commercial AI enablement. And so I look at where they're going. I track where they're going with automobiles. For example, and there's patent filings in that area as well as other areas as they've identified, healthcare and so forth. Not just because I may be working in those areas on behalf of a client, but because these are transferable, right? So I'm picking up early signals there. I'm also looking across sectors, defense in particular, and the U.S. Department of Defense puts a lot of money into this. So I even pay attention to their broad area announcements, asking for for different types of support, because that's clues into what they're looking into. And that's important because cloud technology came out of the DoD, certainly the internet, we know that. And also, even OpenAI was supported in part by defense monies, Palantir for sure. So early signals there, and looking at the various sectors that are which there are innovations. Job descriptions, of course, just looking at how that's evolving in terms of requirements for AI competencies, in addition to specializations, and then looking at the end users and decision makers and what they're doing. It's because I think we fall into the trap of thinking what we think they should be doing, but we also have to pay attention to what they're going to do regardless. And so I am very much paying attention to what they're saying, and types of enthusiasm and resistance that might be there. Whoops. And then I'm looking at various publications, from the information or MIT Technology Review and other, they have an AI publication as well. Discussion boards, hosted by Y Combinator, GitHub, elsewhere, social media. So I'm paying attention to a lot of different, signals to be able to help stitch this together. And that's how I got where we are today, but also what we're going to be looking for over 2024 and beyond. So the areas of greatest innovations that we're paying attention to non-defense, by the way, and defense is its own category, are these. I'm not going to belabor these, but these are just the areas that I want to just put on your radar, because they're innovating. And this is not just important for those of us who are supporting these sectors, but even if you're not supporting these sectors, the innovations that are coming out of some of these sectors are going to translate into products and services for knowledge work. And so that's what I'm also looking at too, is those two layers, right? The sector level innovations, on behalf of specific clients, but also what this means for AI in general. And then I'm always keeping an eye on the barriers and solutions. There's those green or red arrows up and down, or the tilde that kind of has mixed, as you see with privacy. That all is, that's, those are all touchstones for me to see, to gauge timing. Because as barriers are lowered, adoption is accelerated, right? And so we're keeping attuned to these areas. And some of these we just don't know. We don't really have arrows because it's early days, and it's important for us to recognize that too. So with that, I'm going to just go into questions and discussions, but I do want to highlight, I mentioned already that there are some upcoming topics. And so I'm just going to flash for you some of the topics we'll be talking about in the future in our first Friday webinars. And some of these topics I'll be focusing more on in my Substack, the Informed, and all of these links will be at the end. And also our YouTube channel too. I'll be producing some specialized videos beyond these webinars that will just, kind of focus more on specific topics and tutorials. And so these are just some of what's to come. And we want to tackle your questions too. So let me know what you're thinking, and we might spin it off into an article or into some webinar or something else. But the links are here, and so please don't hesitate to reach out and let me know what you're thinking. And then if you want the slide deck, as usual, those of you who subscribe to our newsletter, which is the announcements link, the email that you see down there, that puts you on my radar to send out the handout for this, so you don't have to scramble and take notes or whatnot. Those of you who opted in already during registration, you're already there, so you don't have to get into this. So with that, I am going to stop sharing, and let's take some questions for about 10 minutes or so. And at this point, I'm going to stop recording so that you can speak freely, because people are not anonymized here. So with that, thanks for joining us. And again, Happy New Year, and I look forward to continuing the discussion.